One of the biggest and most unexpected TV events of 2021 had to be Squid Game, a South Korean survival thriller about a group of desperate people lured into a deadly game show with the promise of vast wealth if they survive to the end. The only catch is that failure in any of the games means instant termination, and the more people who die, the greater the share of the prize money goes to the survivors. It was an interesting concept that explored the best and worst aspects of human nature, driven by superb performances from a big ensemble cast that were largely unknown over here in the West, and probably helped a great deal by the fact that everyone was stuck in their homes by the unspecified virus of unknown origin, and there really wasn't much else to do except watch TV. Well, now it's 3 years later, and it's time to return once again to the world of Squid Game. Can the show possibly recapture that lightning in a bottle of season 1, or is it destined to be a one-hit wonder that should have quit while it was ahead? Well, for the most part, I'm happy to say that it's actually still pretty damn good. Yeah, that definitely comes with a few caveats. It's obviously not as fresh and innovative as it was first time around. The script perhaps tries to juggle too many characters and subplots, leaving the protagonist relegated to the background a lot of the time, and the cliffhanger ending is definitely going to piss off a lot of people, but overall it was still more than enough to keep me engaged and entertained for a few hours. And if you'll forgive the Star Trek analogy here, if Season 1 was Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, then Season 2 feels more like The Search for Spock, a safe and slightly workmanlike sequel that builds on the plot points of its predecessor and has some individually good moments but never quite manages to recapture the same magic. Make of that what you will. Anyway, the show picks up about 2 years after the events of Season 1. Gi-eun, the last survivor of the previous Squid Game, has teamed up with the cop who was trying to infiltrate the games in Season 1, and together they've been working to track down the men behind the games so they can put a stop to them once and for all. And holy shit man, he must have had a tough old time because the actor looks like he's aged about a decade. Oh well, that's what the Acolyte does to a man, I guess. It's funny as well because the showrunners must have realised how fucking stupid his pink hair looked at the end of the last season, so they ditch it within like the first 2 minutes. I mean, I get that hair colour is kind of a big deal in Korea, but over here it just makes him look like a washed up old K-pop star. Anyway, whatever. His attempts to track down the recruiter finally bear fruit, bringing him one step closer to his real target, but just when he thinks he's cornered the front man who runs the whole operation, the tables get turned on him, and before you know it, he's right back in the contest again.
Fuck.
Oh, Gi-eun, you silly sausage. Did you really think you were going to outsmart people like this?
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
So I think you can guess the premise here. Gi-eun once again has to fight for survival alongside a bunch of fellow contestants and a shit ton of extras who've all been chosen because they have huge debts that need to be paid off in the real world, doing his best to keep as many of them alive as possible, while his buddies on the outside search for the hidden island where all of this is going down so they can rescue him. The difference this time around is that Gi-eun knows the true nature of the games and in theory at least, how to beat them. And to be fair, the show does a good job of luring you into a false sense of security with the old red light, green light game before pulling the rug out from under you by making all the following games completely different. Now he's no better off than anyone else. The other big change up from Season 1 is that after every game, the contestants are now allowed to vote on whether or not they continue to the next round or call it quits and leave with the money they've won so far. The problem is that the more people who get eliminated, the more money will go to the survivors, and so pretty soon 2 camps emerge. Those who want to gamble everything by going all the way, and those who just want to get out with their lives. And naturally, all the usual dramas you'd expect in Squid Game start to emerge. Short-lived alliances and brutal betrayals, friendships, loyalties, sacrifices, bravery and cowardice, and unexpected twists and turns as the games get ever more deadly. Complicating things even further is the fact that one of the players isn't what he seems and is actively working against the group even as Gi-eun and the others plot a rebellion against the guards. And don't get me started on the breakout attempt itself. The plan was so retarded and completely underestimated the strength of their enemy that I don't see how it ever had a chance of succeeding. I honestly can't believe it came from the mind of a guy who's been through Squid Game before and knows exactly the kind of enemy he's up against. And on the outside, his buddies struggle to find him while contending with betrayals and spies of their own. Oh yeah, and there's even a subplot about an illicit organ harvesting operation within the games, and a woman who's working to prevent it. So as you probably guessed, there's quite a lot happening this season, and that really brings me straight to my biggest criticism of the show. It's trying to keep far too many plates spinning at the same time, and inevitably, some of them get dropped. One of the first big casualties is Gion himself, who gets kinda pushed into the background after the first game, and becomes more of an observer than a protagonist, only really coming back into things for the season finale. There's a ton of periphery characters involved in this narrative, all with their own backstories and subplots, and don't get me wrong, they're all interesting in their own way and generally played by really good actors. And while it definitely helps you to get invested in them, I can't help feeling that a tighter focus on a smaller group of core characters would have worked better. The storyline about a group of mercenaries trying to rescue Gion from the outside is another big downer for me. It eats up a lot of screen time without really going anywhere and starts to drag the pace after a while. And that's not even mentioning the organ harvesting subplot, which crops up so infrequently that you kind of forget it's even happening, and it becomes more of an annoying distraction than a gripping part of the narrative. Oh yeah, I might as well address the other big gripe here as well. The ending. See, season 2 feels more like part 1 of a complete narrative rather than a full storyline that delivers a satisfying conclusion but also sets things up for what's coming next. Instead, it just kind of stopped right in the middle of a big climactic breakout attempt, and I can't shake the feeling that the writers were trying to spin out a single season's worth of story into 2 frustratingly underdeveloped mini-seasons to keep people coming back. I can't say for sure, but when I think about the bloated cast of periphery characters and the protracted subplots, it seems like they probably could have condensed all of this into one really strong, concise season instead of what we got here. On the plus side though, the performances and character work are still strong. It doesn't take long to get a sense of who everyone is and what motivates them, and when they start to get killed off, I felt genuinely bad for them. That being said, I could have done without the weird demented witch woman who keeps cropping up. I don't really get the point of her character, and she comes across as goofy and annoying most of the time. The games themselves are all fine, maybe not as brutally unfair and heart-wrenching as some of the best moments from season 1, but they definitely test characters and their loyalties in interesting ways. But probably the strongest and most gripping aspect of the season is the voting system, where you really get an insight into what each person values and how far they'll go to get it. It delves into the core of what Squid Game is actually about, the conflict between personal interest and the greater good, the temptation to risk it all on one more game, and the kind of people that might appeal to. Oh yeah, and before any of the self-proclaimed media literacy midwits take a break from sucking their own dicks to tell you that this show is intended as a critique of capitalist systems and the exploitation of the working class by the corrupt rich overlords, it isn't. It's an exploration of human nature, of greed, ambition, and selfishness, qualities that have existed in our species long before money was ever invented, and persisted even when it was removed. In fact, I would argue it became even more pronounced when they tried to remove it, but that's another discussion. It's an imperfect sequel for sure, but as long as you don't go into it with sky-high expectations, I think there's still a lot of entertainment to be had in Squid Game, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested to see how it all ends next season. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.